The CEO's Gulfstream was still taxiing when he started screaming at me through the cockpit window. I could see his mouth moving, face turning that particular shade of crimson that meant someone was about to get fired. The window was closed, engines still whining, but I'd been doing this job long enough to read lips. Move your ass. That was Marcus Whitfield, founder and CEO of Whitfield Aerospace Technologies, net worth somewhere north of $4 billion, the kind of man who measured time in 6-minute increments, because that's how his lawyers billed. I was standing on the tarmac at Whitfield Private Aviation Terminal, holding a fluorescent orange wand, directing his $65 million aircraft to its designated parking spot. Standard procedure, FAA regulation, the kind of boring safety protocol that keeps planes from crashing into fuel trucks. But Marcus Whitfield didn't care about protocol. The Gulfstream lurched forward, ignoring my hand signals. The pilot was following Whitfield's orders, not mine. They came in hot, way too fast for a parking approach, and I had to dive sideways to avoid getting clipped by the wing. I hit the concrete hard, rolled, tasted blood where I'd bitten my tongue. The jet finally stopped, and the door popped open before the engines finished spooling down. Whitfield emerged like royalty descending from a golden chariot, adjusting his cufflinks and checking his phone simultaneously. He didn't look at me, didn't acknowledge that his pilot had nearly turned me into a speed bump, just walked past like I was a traffic cone with a pulse. "Harrison!" he barked at someone behind me. "Why is there still a fuel truck in Bay 3? I told you I wanted that cleared for the Dubai delegation. Are you people incapable of following simple instructions?" I picked myself up off the ground, brushed gravel from my safety vest, and watched him disappear into the terminal. My radio crackled. "Danny, you okay?" "Saw that from the tower." "That was close." I keyed the mic. "I'm fine, Ray. Just another day in paradise." But I wasn't fine. And it wasn't just another day. Because what Marcus Whitfield didn't know, what nobody at this airport knew, was that I wasn't just Danny Chen, ground crew supervisor. I was Daniel Chen, former FAA certification specialist, former aviation safety investigator, former lead auditor for the National Transportation Safety Board, and I held the original signature on every safety certification that Whitfield Private Aviation Terminal had ever received. Every single one. Here's something people don't understand about private aviation. It's not like commercial flying. There's no TSA, no long security lines, no taking off your shoes for minimum wage workers who hate their jobs. Private aviation is freedom. You show up, you board, you fly. Simple. But that freedom comes with a price. Trust. The FAA trusts that private terminals will follow safety protocols, trusts that fuel will be uncontaminated, trusts that runways will be maintained, trusts that ground crews will be properly trained. That trust is formalized through a document called a Part 139 certification. Without it, you can't operate. Period. 15 years ago, when this airport was just a dream in Marcus Whitfield's head, he needed someone to navigate the certification process, someone who understood the Byzantine maze of federal regulations, someone with connections at the FAA. He needed me. Back then, I was a rising star at the agency, 10 years of field experience, spotless record, reputation for being thorough but fair. Whitfield's people approached me with an offer, triple my government salary, stock options, corner office, and the title of Director of Aviation Safety. I said yes, helped them build this place from the ground up, wrote every safety protocol, trained every employee, signed every form. My name is on everything. Then, 3 years in, Whitfield brought in his nephew Brandon to modernize operations. Brandon was 28, had an MBA from Stanford, and thought safety procedures were friction in the customer experience pipeline. He started cutting corners, reducing inspection frequencies, outsourcing maintenance to the lowest bidder, skipping mandatory training refreshers. I objected, loudly, put my concerns in writing, demanded meetings with the board. The board sided with Brandon. And me, I got restructured. They didn't fire me. That would have required a paper trail, an exit interview, proper documentation. Instead, they eliminated my position and offered me a new role, ground crew supervisor. Same building, same airport, a fraction of the salary. They thought I'd quit. Most people would have. But I stayed, and I watched, and I documented. For 12 years, I've been invisible. The old guy in the orange vest who waves planes around. The one who gets screamed at by billionaires and ignored by everyone else. 12 years of watching Brandon and Whitfield gut every safety system I built. 12 years of collecting evidence. 12 years of waiting for the right moment. Today, Marcus Whitfield nearly killed me with his Gulfstream. Tomorrow I was going to destroy everything he'd built. But first, I needed to understand why he was in such a hurry. I found out at lunch. The break room at Whitfield Aviation was a sad little space tucked behind the maintenance hangar. Plastic chairs, vending machines that ate quarters, and a microwave that smelled like someone had heated fish in 2019 and never cleaned it. I sat in the corner with my turkey sandwich, pretending to read a newspaper while two young guys from the admin building gossiped 3 tables away. "Dubai's flying in tonight," one said, "like the actual prince or something." "Sheikh," the other corrected. "Sheikh Rashid Al Maktoum. His investment fund is looking at acquiring Watt, Whitfield Aerospace Technologies, Marcus's baby, the company he'd built from a single cargo plane into a logistics empire." "How much?" "I heard 12 billion, with a B." I kept my face neutral, but my mind was racing. $12 billion. That explained the panic. That explained why Whitfield had nearly run me over to get to his meeting on time. "The inspection's tomorrow, right?" the first guy asked. "Yeah, runway certification renewal. Some FAA guy flying in from DC. My sandwich stopped halfway to my mouth. Runway certification renewal. Tomorrow. I hadn't heard about this, which meant they'd kept it off the internal calendar, which meant they were trying to hide something. "Whitfield's been down at the South Hangar all week," the second guy continued. "They're doing something with the landing lights. Fixing them." "Nah, man, installing new ones, like way brighter." Brandon said the old ones were insufficient for premium client expectations, whatever that means. I knew exactly what it meant. The original landing lights were FAA certified. Specific wattage, specific spacing, specific angle. You can't just swap them out for something brighter because you think it looks better. The certification specifications are tied to the hardware. Change the hardware, you invalidate the certification. And if the certification is invalid during an inspection, I smiled behind my newspaper. Brandon had just handed me a loaded gun. Now I needed to find out how deep the bullet went. That night I stayed late. Not unusual. Ground crew supervisors often work odd hours, especially during VIP arrivals. Nobody questioned why Danny Chen was wandering around the maintenance hangar at 11 p.m. The south hangar was locked, but my keycard still worked. Another oversight. When they demoted me, they forgot to update my access credentials. I could still get into areas that a ground crew supervisor had no business being. Inside, I found exactly what I expected. The new landing lights were commercial grade. Bright, yes, impressive, certainly, but not FAA certified for runway operations. The mounting brackets were wrong. The wiring was non-compliant. The spacing deviated from specifications by almost 6 inches per light. I took photos, dozens of them, time-stamped, geotagged, with my face visible in several to prove I was on site. Then I checked the maintenance logs. This was where it got interesting. According to the official records, the landing lights had been inspected and approved by the Director of Safety Compliance. Signature on file, Brandon Whitfield, but the inspection date was listed as next month. They'd pre-signed the approval form before the inspection even happened. I cross-referenced with the FAA's online database. The certification showed as current, which meant someone had uploaded fraudulent documentation to the federal system. That wasn't a violation. That was a felony. I photographed everything. The lights, the logs, the discrepancy between physical installation and official records. Then I went home and started making calls. First call was to Linda Morrison at the FAA's certification branch. We'd worked together for years back in my auditor days. She'd retired last year, but she still had friends in the agency. "Danny Chen, it's been a while. Too long, Linda. I need a favor." "Name it." "I need to know who's doing the Part 139 inspection at Whitfield Aviation tomorrow." Pause. I could hear her thinking. "That's not public information until the report is filed." "I know, but I also know that inspector is walking into a trap. Fraudulent documentation, non-compliant equipment, pre-signed approval forms." Longer pause. "Are you sure about this?" "I have photographs, time-stamped, from tonight. Send them to me." I did, waited while she reviewed them. "Jesus, Danny, this is bad." "It gets worse. There's a $12 billion acquisition happening. Dubai investors. If the certification looks clean, the deal goes through. If it doesn't, then someone's been cooking the books to close a massive sale." "Exactly. The inspector tomorrow is Martin Hayes. Good guy, thorough. But if Whitfield's people have doctored the records this carefully, he might not catch it without knowing where to look. That's why I'm calling. I want to be there. During the inspection." "Danny, you're ground crew. You have no standing to—" "I have every standing. My signature is still on the original certification documents." Every safety protocol in that building was written by me. If those protocols have been violated, I have a fiduciary duty to report it. Silence. You've been planning this for a while, haven't you? I thought about 12 years of waiting, 12 years of being invisible, 12 years of watching Brandon Whitfield piss on everything I built. You could say that. I'll call Martin tonight. He'll want to see those photos. Thank you, Linda. Danny, whatever you're about to do, be careful. These people have resources. So do I said. They just don't know it yet. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with 12 years of documentation spread across every surface, binders full of incident reports, folders full of emails, boxes full of photographs, every corner cut, every safety violation. Every time I'd flagged a concern and been told to shut up, I'd kept copies of everything. When they took away my title, I'd already backed up the important files. When they reduced my access, I'd already photographed the sensitive areas. When they thought they'd buried me, I was building an archive. The key document was a memo from 2019. Brandon had proposed reducing runway inspections from weekly to monthly. I'd written a formal objection, citing FAA regulations and historical incident data. The objection was ignored, and the inspection frequency was changed. 3 months later, a charter jet had a tire blowout on landing. The pilot managed to keep control, but the investigation revealed that the runway surface had deteriorated to dangerous levels that would have been caught by a weekly inspection. The incident was never reported to the FAA. Brandon buried it, paid off the pilot, threatened the maintenance crew, and I kept the original report. Then there was the fuel contamination issue in 2021. A fuel truck had been filled with diesel instead of Jet A. Basic mistake, should have been caught by testing. But Brandon had eliminated the mandatory fuel testing protocol to save money. The contaminated fuel made it into 3 aircraft before someone noticed. All 3 planes had engine problems. One made an emergency landing in a cornfield. Again, no report to the FAA. Again, payoffs and threats. Again, I had the documentation. But the landing lights were the cherry on top. This wasn't a safety shortcut or a cost-saving measure. This was deliberate fraud. They'd installed non-compliant equipment and then falsified federal records to cover it up. The penalty for that wasn't a fine or a slap on the wrist. It was prison, and Marcus Whitfield, the man who'd nearly killed me on the tarmac yesterday, was about to find out that the invisible ground crew guy he'd been ignoring for 12 years had just become the most dangerous person in his life. Morning came gray and cold. I dressed carefully, not my usual ground crew uniform. Today I wore the suit I'd kept in the back of my closet since my auditor days, navy blue, conservative cut, the kind of suit that said, "I belong in meetings." My FAA identification card was technically expired, but I'd kept it in perfect condition, laminated. My photo from 15 years ago stared back at me, younger and more naive. I tucked it in my pocket next to the current Whitfield Aviation employee badge. 2 identities, 2 access levels, 2 different versions of Danny Chen. At 8:47 a.m., a silver sedan pulled into the terminal parking lot, government plates. I watched from the break room window as Martin Hayes emerged, briefcase in hand. Linda had called him. He knew what he was walking into, but he didn't know the full scope yet. That was my job. I waited until Hayes was inside the terminal, then made my move. The inspection was scheduled for the main conference room on the 3rd floor. Brandon Whitfield would be there, along with the compliance team and several lawyers. They were expecting a routine review, a few questions about maintenance logs, and a rubber stamp on their certification renewal. What they got was me. I walked into the conference room at 9:15, right as Hayes was setting up his laptop. Brandon looked up, confused. "Danny, what are you doing here? This is an executive meeting." I didn't answer him. Instead, I walked to Martin Hayes and extended my hand. "Inspector Hayes, I'm Daniel Chen, former FAA certification specialist. My signature is on the original Part 139 documents for this facility." Hayes shook my hand. His eyes were sharp, calculating. "Mr. Chen, I received some interesting materials last night." Brandon's face went pale. "What materials? What is he talking about?" I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a thick folder, set it on the table in front of Hayes. "This is a summary of safety violations at this facility dating back 12 years. Equipment modifications performed without certification updates, incident reports that were never filed, maintenance protocols that were reduced below regulatory minimums." I pulled out a second folder. "This is documentation of the landing light installation in the south hangar. As you can see from the photographs, the equipment is not FAA certified. The wiring does not meet code. The approval forms were pre-signed with a future inspection date." Brandon stood up so fast his chair fell over. This is ridiculous. This man is a disgruntled employee. He was demoted years ago for performance issues. Nothing he says has any credibility. I smiled. The kind of smile you give someone when they've just stepped on a landmine and don't know it yet. Actually, Mr. Whitfield, I was demoted because I objected to the safety shortcuts you were implementing. I have the emails. I have the memos. I have written documentation of every objection I raised and every time I was overruled. I pulled out a third folder, and I have this. A fuel contamination incident from 2021 that was never reported to the FAA. 3 aircraft affected. 1 emergency landing. You paid off the pilot, threatened the maintenance crew, and buried the report. Hayes was already taking notes. Brandon was shaking. You can't prove any of this. Mr. Whitfield, Hayes said quietly. The photographs Mr. Chen provided show clear violations of federal aviation regulations, Part 139.321 and 139.325. If even half of what's in these folders is accurate, we're not talking about a certification renewal. We're talking about a criminal investigation. The door to the conference room burst open. Marcus Whitfield stood in the doorway, still wearing his coat, phone clutched in his hand. Behind him, 2 men in expensive suits. Lawyers, probably. What the hell is going on here? Brandon, I just got a call from... He stopped when he saw me. For a moment, confusion flickered across his face, then recognition. You, the ground crew guy. Good morning, Mr. Whitfield. I kept my voice pleasant. Inspector Hayes and I were just discussing some documentation issues with your certification application. Marcus looked at the folders spread across the table, at his nephew's ashen face, at the FAA inspector, who was very pointedly not looking at him. I don't know what you think you're doing, Marcus said, his voice low and dangerous, but whatever grudge you have, this is not the way to handle it. This isn't a grudge, Mr. Whitfield. This is a legal matter. Your facility has been operating with fraudulent safety certifications. Your nephew has been filing false reports with federal agencies, and 12 years ago, you demoted the one person who tried to stop it. I stood up straight, looking him dead in the eyes. You nearly ran me over with your jet yesterday. Didn't even slow down. Didn't look back. Because to you, I'm invisible. Just a guy in an orange vest who waves his hands around. I leaned forward. I've been invisible for 12 years. Watching, waiting, documenting everything. Every shortcut, every cover-up. Every time you put money ahead of safety. I pointed at the folders. That's 12 years of evidence. And in about 3 hours, copies of everything in those folders will be delivered to the FBI, the Department of Transportation Inspector General, and the Wall Street Journal. Marcus Whitfield's face went through a rapid evolution. Confusion, anger, fear. The Dubai deal, he whispered. Yes, I know about that too. $12 billion. Quite a payday. But I don't think Sheikh Rashid is going to be interested in buying a company that's about to be investigated for federal fraud. I picked up my briefcase. Inspector Hayes has my contact information if he needs additional documentation. Gentlemen, I'll leave you to your meeting. I walked toward the door. Marcus grabbed my arm. Wait, just wait. Let's talk about this. Whatever you want, we can work something out. Money, your old position back, anything. I looked at his hand on my arm, then at his face. 2 years ago, one of your charter pilots reported a problem with his landing gear. Brandon told him to fly anyway, said the inspection could wait until the plane reached its destination. I pulled my arm free. That pilot was my brother-in-law. He made it barely. Emergency landing, walked away with a broken collarbone and nightmares that still wake him up at 3 a.m. I stepped closer to Marcus, close enough to smell his expensive cologne. You asked what I want? I want you to feel what it's like to have everything taken away, to be powerless, to watch everything you built crumble because someone decided you didn't matter. I walked out the door. Behind me, I heard shouting, Brandon's voice high and panicked, Marcus's deeper bark, the lawyers trying to calm everyone down. But the damage was done. The inspection report filed by Martin Hayes that afternoon was devastating. 17 violations of FAA regulations, 8 incidents of falsified documentation, 3 cases of unreported safety incidents, and 1 case of fraudulent submission to a federal database, which elevated the whole thing to felony status. The Part 139 certification was revoked immediately. Whitfield Aviation was grounded, but that was just the beginning. At 2 p.m., the Wall Street Journal published their story. I'd given them everything 2 weeks ago, with instructions to hold until today. The headline, Safety Shortcuts and Cover-Ups, The Hidden Dangers of Whitfield Aviation. The story detailed 12 years of violations, named names, included photographs, quoted anonymous employees who'd been afraid to speak up for years. By 3 p.m., Whitfield Aerospace Technologies stock had dropped 40%. By 4 p.m., Sheikh Rashid's office issued a statement. Due to recently emerged concerns, Al Maktoum Investment Group is suspending acquisition discussions with Whitfield Aerospace Technologies, $12 billion. Gone. At 5 p.m., the FBI announced they were opening an investigation into potential federal fraud at Whitfield Aviation. At 6 p.m., the board of directors held an emergency meeting. By 7 p.m., Marcus Whitfield had been removed as CEO. Brandon Whitfield was arrested the next morning. The pre-signed inspection forms were pretty damning evidence of intent. Marcus wasn't arrested, not yet, but his lawyers were working around the clock, and the civil suits were already piling up. Shareholders, former employees, insurance companies. The invisible man had become very visible indeed. A week later, I was cleaning out my locker at the maintenance hangar when a woman approached me. Tall, silver hair, expensive suit but not flashy, the kind of person who didn't need to show off wealth because everyone already knew she had it. Daniel Chen? That's me. I'm Victoria Sterling. I represent Sterling Aviation Group. We're interested in acquiring certain assets from the Whitfield bankruptcy. I raised an eyebrow. Bankruptcy's not filed yet. It will be within the month. She smiled. We've been watching this situation develop. Very impressive work, by the way. I just collected evidence. The FAA did the rest. Modest. I like that. She handed me a business card. We're looking for someone to head up our safety compliance division, someone with integrity, someone who understands that cutting corners costs more than it saves. I looked at the card, then at her. Why me? I'm just a ground crew supervisor. Victoria Sterling laughed. Mr. Chen, I've read your resume. The real one. I know what you were before they buried you in an orange vest, and I know what you did to bring down a $4 billion empire. She tilted her head. We don't need a yes man. We need someone who'll tell us the truth, even when we don't want to hear it. Someone who'll put safety above profit. Someone who can't be bought. She extended her hand. The position comes with a corner office, a staff of 12, and a salary roughly 6 times what Whitfield was paying you. Interested. I thought about it for about 3 seconds. I'll need full authority over compliance decisions, no overrides from executives. Agreed. All safety concerns documented in writing, with mandatory board review. Of course. And I wanted in my contract that if I identify a violation, I have the authority to ground operations until it's fixed. No exceptions. Victoria Sterling's smile widened. Mr. Chen, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful partnership. We shook hands. Behind me, through the hangar window, I could see workers removing the Whitfield Aviation sign from the terminal building. 12 years of patience, 12 years of documentation, 12 years of being invisible. And now I was the guy who decided whether planes flew. Funny how things work out. But that wasn't the end of the story. 3 weeks after I started at Sterling Aviation, I got a call from an unknown number. Mr. Chen, this is Sarah Martinez. I'm a reporter with the Chicago Tribune. I'm working on a story about aviation safety oversight, and your name keeps coming up. I'm not really giving interviews right now. I understand, but this isn't about Whitfield. This is about a pattern I've identified across multiple private aviation facilities. Cost-cutting, safety shortcuts, regulatory capture. I sat up straighter. Go on. I've been investigating this for 2 years. Whitfield wasn't unique. There are at least a dozen facilities across the country doing similar things. The difference is, they haven't been caught yet. What do you need from me? I need someone who understands the regulations, who knows what to look for, who can help me interpret the technical documentation I've obtained. I thought about my brother-in-law, about the nightmares he still had, about how many other families had similar stories. Send me what you've got. The files arrived that evening, thousands of pages, maintenance logs, inspection reports, internal emails. And she was right. It was a pattern. Private aviation had become the Wild West. The FAA was understaffed, underfunded, and overworked. They couldn't inspect everything, so they relied on self-reporting, trusted the industry to police itself, and the industry had failed. Over the next 6 months, I worked with Sarah Martinez on her investigation. Nights and weekends, going through documentation, identifying violations, connecting dots. Sterling Aviation became my day job. Exposing industry-wide corruption became my mission. The series published in April. 7 parts. Front page. Danger in the Skies. How Private Aviation Abandoned Safety for Profit. It named names. It cited sources. It included internal documents that executives thought would never see the light of day. Congress held hearings. The FAA announced a comprehensive audit of all Part 139 facilities. New regulations were proposed, new funding was allocated for inspection staff. Change doesn't happen overnight. The industry fought back. Lobbyists worked overtime, politicians were pressured. But the genie was out of the bottle, and somewhere in the middle of it all, I got a letter. No return address, handwritten, postmarked from a federal correctional facility in Pennsylvania. Mr. Chen, I've had a lot of time to think over the past few months about what I did, about why I did it, about the people I hurt. I know an apology doesn't mean much coming from me. I know you have no reason to believe I'm sincere, but I need to say it anyway. You were right about everything. The shortcuts, the risks, the cover-ups. I told myself it was just business, that everyone did it, that as long as no one got hurt, it didn't matter. But people did get hurt. Your brother-in-law, the pilot in the cornfield, probably others I don't even know about. My uncle taught me that rules were for other people, that wealth meant you didn't have to follow the same laws as everyone else. I believed him. For years, I believed him. I don't anymore. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just asking you to know that something changed, that somewhere in the wreckage of everything I destroyed, something finally got through. Brandon Whitfield. I read the letter twice. Then I folded it carefully and put it in my desk drawer. Redemption is a tricky thing. Some people earn it, some people fake it, some people never even try. I didn't know which category Brandon fell into. Didn't know if prison had actually changed him or if this was just another manipulation. But I kept the letter, because 12 years ago, I could have walked away, could have taken another job, moved to another city, forgotten about Whitfield Aviation and everyone in it. I didn't. I stayed. I waited. I documented. And when the moment came, I was ready. That's what separates consequences from revenge. Revenge is emotional, personal. It burns hot and fast and leaves nothing but ash. Consequences are different. Consequences require patience, planning, documentation, the willingness to play a long game when everyone else is sprinting. Marcus Whitfield never went to prison. His lawyers were too good, his accountants too creative, but the civil suits stripped him of almost everything. Last I heard, he was living in a small apartment in New Jersey, working as a consultant for a logistics company. The man who once flew private jets to breakfast meetings now took the bus. Brandon got 18 months. He'll be out soon. Whether the letter was sincere or not, he'll have a chance to prove it. The Dubai acquisition never happened. Sheikh Rashid found other investments. Sterling Aviation ended up buying Whitfield's assets at pennies on the dollar. Funny how things work out. My brother-in-law Mark finally stopped having nightmares about 6 months after the story broke. He says it helped, knowing that something came from what happened to him, that the people responsible faced consequences. His daughter, my niece, is 12 now. She wants to be a pilot. I told her I'd pay for flight school when she's old enough, but I'm going to make sure she learns to do it right. The industry is changing. Slowly, reluctantly, but it's changing. New regulations require stricter documentation. New technology makes falsifying records harder. New oversight means violations are more likely to be caught. It's not perfect. It'll never be perfect. There will always be someone trying to cut corners, trying to save money at the expense of safety. But now, there are also people watching, documenting, waiting, people like me. Victoria Sterling promoted me to Chief Safety Officer last year. Corner office on the top floor. View of the runway. From my window, I can see the planes taking off and landing. Passengers going about their lives, never knowing how much effort goes into keeping them safe. Never thinking about the ground crews and inspectors and auditors who work behind the scenes. That's okay. They shouldn't have to think about it. That's my job now. I still keep Scott's case file in my desk. The pilot who died because someone decided schedules were more important than safety. The man who trusted the system, and the system failed him. I never knew Scott personally. He died 3 years before I started working at Whitfield. But his story was one of dozens I uncovered during my investigation. His widow got a settlement. His children got college funds. His memory got buried under legal agreements and non-disclosure clauses, until Sarah Martinez's investigation brought it back. His name was in the Tribune series. His story was told. His death was documented as part of a pattern, not dismissed as an isolated incident. That matters. It's not justice, exactly. Justice would mean Scott still being alive. Justice would mean his kids growing up with a father instead of a settlement check. But it's something, and sometimes something is all you get. The day Marcus Whitfield nearly ran me over with his Gulfstream, he didn't know who I was, didn't care. I was invisible. The day I walked into that conference room with 12 years of documentation, he suddenly saw me, very clearly. Too late. That's the thing about invisible people. We see everything, hear everything, document everything. And when we finally decide to become visible, the people who ignored us don't know what hit them. I keep a photo on my desk. It's from my first day at Sterling Aviation, standing in front of the new terminal with Victoria Sterling and the rest of the executive team. I'm wearing a suit now, not an orange vest. I have a title, an office, a staff. People call me Sir and wait for my approval before making decisions. But I remember what it felt like to be ignored, to be treated like furniture, to have someone's coffee cup thrown at my feet. I remember, and I make sure my team treats everyone with respect. The ground crews, the maintenance workers, the cleaning staff, because you never know who's watching. You never know who's documenting. And you never know when the invisible person you ignored today will become the person who decides your fate tomorrow. Marcus Whitfield learned that lesson the hard way. I made sure of it. Last month, I got another letter. This one had a return address, a law firm in Manhattan. Whitfield and Associates, not Marcus's firm. His grandson's, apparently. Young kid, just past the bar, decided to start fresh with the family name. Specialize in aviation law. Mr. Chen, you don't know me, but I know who you are. My grandfather talks about you. Not kindly, obviously. I'm writing because I'm trying to understand what happened. The official version, the family version, they don't add up. Too many holes. Too many things that don't make sense. I read the Tribune series, I reviewed the court documents. I obtained the FAA investigation file through a FORA request, and I think my grandfather and my father got exactly what they deserved. I'm not asking you to forgive them. I'm not asking you to forget what they did. I'm asking if you'd be willing to meet with me, off the record, just to talk. I'm trying to build something different, something better, and I think I could learn from someone who actually cares about doing things right. No expectations, no agenda, just a conversation, if you're willing. Respectfully, Thomas Whitfield III. I read the letter 3 times. Then I picked up the phone and called his office. Redemption takes many forms. Sometimes it's a letter from prison. Sometimes it's a grandson trying to escape his family's shadow. Sometimes it's an industry slowly, painfully learning to do better. And sometimes it's an invisible man finally being seen. I'm not sure what will come from meeting Thomas. Maybe nothing, maybe something, but I've learned that patience matters, that documentation matters, that giving people a chance matters, even when their family doesn't deserve it. The Whitfield name nearly killed my brother-in-law. Maybe the Whitfield name can help save someone else. That's not forgiveness, that's not forgetting. That's just understanding that consequences and redemption aren't mutually exclusive. You can hold people accountable for what they did while still hoping they become better. You can tear down a corrupt empire while still believing that something good can grow in its place. You can be invisible for 12 years and then choose to be seen. The choice is always there. The question is whether you're patient enough to wait for the right moment. I was, and that made all the difference. Part 2. The architect. They found the body on a Tuesday. Not that anyone told me about it until Thursday, which, looking back, was probably intentional. My name is Eleanor Price. I'm 57 years old. I've worked at Thornwood Architectural Group for the past 32 years, rising from intern to senior partner. At least I was a senior partner, until Garrett Thornwood III decided that my decades of experience were legacy overhead and that the firm needed to embrace a more dynamic future. The body they found on Tuesday belonged to a construction worker named Miguel Santos. He fell from the 23rd floor of a building I designed, a building where someone, and I had my suspicions about who, had approved construction changes without consulting me, changes that compromised the safety railing specifications I had signed off on. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning. When Richard Thornwood founded this firm in 1952, architecture was a different industry. Buildings were designed to last centuries. Every calculation was checked 3 times. Every material was tested to destruction. Richard believed that an architect's signature wasn't just a formality. It was a promise, a commitment, a statement that said, I have reviewed this design, and I believe it is safe. I learned that lesson from Richard himself. He was my mentor, my champion, my surrogate grandfather. When I started here as a 25-year-old intern with stars in my eyes and not much else, he took me under his wing. Eleanor, he told me once, anyone can draw a pretty picture. An architect makes sure the pretty picture won't fall down and kill someone. I never forgot that. Richard died in 2018. His son, Garrett Jr., took over briefly before retiring to Palm Beach, and then came Garrett III. Garrett III was 34 years old, had an MBA from Wharton, and thought architecture was basically like designing websites, but with more concrete. He'd never been on a construction site, never reviewed a structural calculation, never understood why it mattered that every bolt was specified and every weld was inspected. To him, buildings were products, clients were customers, and experienced architects were obstacles to operational efficiency. Within 6 months of taking over, he'd eliminated 3 senior positions, outsourced our calculation verification to a firm in the Philippines, and implemented something he called agile architecture, which apparently meant rushing projects through without proper review. I objected, loudly, in writing, to anyone who would listen. Nobody listened. 2 weeks before Miguel Santos fell to his death, Garrett called me into his office. "Eleanor, we need to talk about your role going forward." I'd been expecting this, dreading it, but expecting it. "I've been reviewing the partnership structure, and frankly, your compensation is disproportionate to your deliverables." My deliverables? 32 years of flawless safety records, 47 completed buildings, none of which had ever had a structural failure, a reputation in the industry that brought clients to our door. Deliverables, I repeated. Output metrics, billable hours, client acquisition rates. He waved his hand. The traditional measures of value. "I design buildings, Garrett. I ensure they don't fall down." "That's my value." He smiled. The kind of smile you see on people who think they're much smarter than everyone else in the room. "Design is a collaborative process now, Eleanor. We've implemented AI-assisted drafting. We've streamlined our review procedures. The old model of a single architect obsessing over every detail is antiquated. The old model kept people alive." His smile didn't waver. "We're offering you a transition package. Generous, considering the circumstances. You can stay on as a consultant for 6 months, train your replacement, and then move on to new opportunities." I looked at him. This child in a suit, sitting in his grandfather's chair, using words like streamlined and opportunities to describe throwing away everything Richard Thornwood had built. "And if I don't accept," the smile flickered, "then we'll have to proceed with a standard separation. No transition period, no consulting arrangement, just termination." I thought about 32 years, about Richard's faith in me, about the buildings I'd designed, the lives those buildings sheltered, the families that grew up in homes I'd made safe. "I'll need to think about it. Take the weekend, but Eleanor?" He leaned forward. "This isn't negotiable. The firm is moving in a new direction. You're either on the bus or you're not." I left his office without another word. That was Friday. On Tuesday, Miguel Santos fell from the 23rd floor of Thornwood Tower South. I found out on Thursday because someone anonymously forwarded me the OSHA incident report. The safety railings on the 23rd floor had been installed incorrectly. The mounting brackets were wrong, a cheaper alternative that couldn't support the required load. When Miguel leaned against the railing while positioning a steel beam, it gave way. He was 34 years old, same age as Garrett. He had a wife and 2 children, and the construction change order that approved the cheaper brackets had my signature on it, except it didn't. Not really, I never signed that change order. I'd never even seen it. But there it was in the project files, a scanned document with what looked like my signature, approving a modification I never approved. Someone had forged my authorization, and that someone had killed Miguel Santos. I sat in my home office staring at that forged signature, and I felt something cold settle in my chest. This wasn't just about me anymore. This wasn't about a consulting package or a graceful exit or moving on to new opportunities. A man was dead because someone wanted to save money on mounting brackets, and they'd used my name to do it. They'd made me complicit in murder. I picked up the phone and called the one person I trusted. "Nathan, it's Eleanor. I need your help." Nathan Cross had been my first hire when I made partner, 20 years ago. He'd left the firm 5 years later, started his own practice, and built a reputation as one of the most meticulous forensic architects in the country. When buildings failed, Nathan figured out why. "Eleanor, it's been a while. What's going on?" "I think someone at Thornwood forged my signature to approve unsafe construction. A worker died, and I think I know who did it, but I need proof." Long pause. "Tell me everything." I did. The meeting with Garrett, the transition package, the anonymous OSHA report, the forged change order. When I finished, Nathan was quiet for a moment. "You said the mounting brackets were a cheaper alternative. Who would have benefited from that substitution?" "The general contractor gets a kickback on any cost savings they achieve under budget. The project manager gets a bonus for on-time, under-budget delivery, and Garrett gets to report better margins to the board. So everyone in the chain had an incentive to cut corners. Everyone except me. I had an incentive to keep people alive, which is why they needed your signature, or something that looked like it." "Exactly," Nathan sighed. "Eleanor, this is going to get ugly. If we can prove the forgery, someone's going to prison. Maybe multiple someones. Are you ready for that? I thought about Miguel Santos, about his wife, his children, the life that ended because someone wanted to save money on mounting brackets. I've been ready for 32 years. Then let's get to work. Nathan flew in from Chicago the next day. We set up in my dining room, spreading documents across every surface. First, we analyzed the forged signature. To an untrained eye, it looked like mine. Same loops, same spacing, same general appearance. But there were tells. My real signature has a slight hesitation between the E and the L, a habit I picked up decades ago when I was trying to make my handwriting more legible. The forged version doesn't have that hesitation. It's too smooth, too confident. Also, I use a specific pen for official documents, a Mont Blanc fountain pen that Richard gave me when I made partner. It leaves a distinctive mark, slightly thick on the downstrokes, thin on the horizontals. The forged signature was clearly made with a ballpoint. We documented everything, photographed the original, had a handwriting expert confirm the discrepancies, built a file that would hold up in court. Then we started tracing the paper trail. The change order had been entered into the project management system 3 months ago. The system logged the username, ePrice, but I hadn't been in the office that day. I'd been at a site inspection in New Jersey, documented by GPS-tracked mileage logs and a meeting sign-in sheet with 20 witnesses. Someone had used my credentials. Nathan knew someone in IT security. Within a week, we had the IP logs for the system access. The change order had been submitted from a computer in the executive suite, Garrett's office. We had him, but we needed more. We needed to understand the full scope. Over the next 2 weeks, we audited every project Thornwood had completed in the past 3 years. Every change order, every material substitution, every cost-saving measure. The pattern was damning. Dozens of modifications, cheaper materials, reduced specifications, shortcuts in inspection procedures, and on almost every one, my signature, forged, always forged, approving changes I never saw. It wasn't just Thornwood Tower South. It was 7 buildings scattered across 3 states, all containing structural compromises that could fail at any moment. We weren't just looking at one death anymore. We were looking at potential catastrophe. The question was, what to do about it? Going to the police was the obvious answer. But police investigations take time, months, maybe years. And during that time, people would be living and working in buildings that might collapse at any moment. We needed to move faster. I called Linda Morrison. Yes, the same Linda Morrison who'd helped Danny Chen with his aviation case. Linda had retired from the FAA, but she'd immediately gotten bored and taken a consulting job with the Department of Housing and Urban Development. She knew people. She could make things happen. Eleanor, my God, this is massive. I know. You're talking about systematic fraud across multiple projects, forged signatures, structural compromises, a death that might be the tip of the iceberg. I know. Pause. I could hear her thinking. There's a procedure for this. Emergency safety assessment. If HUD believes there's an imminent threat to life safety, we can order evacuations and inspections without waiting for a court order. How fast? Fast. Days, not months. But Eleanor, you understand what this means. If we trigger this process, Thornwood Architectural Group will be destroyed. Every project under investigation, every client demanding answers, insurance claims, lawsuits, criminal charges. I thought about Richard Thornwood, about the firm he'd built, the legacy he'd created, the name that had meant something for 70 years. Then I thought about Miguel Santos, about his children who would grow up without a father, about the families living in buildings that might kill them. Do it, I said. Burn it to the ground if you have to. The next week was chaos. HUD ordered emergency inspections of all 7 buildings we'd identified. Engineers with sophisticated equipment descended on each site, checking load-bearing calculations against actual construction. What they found was worse than we expected. Thornwood Tower South was the most critical. The mounting bracket issue wasn't isolated. It was systematic. Half the safety railings in the building were compromised. 2 fire escape stairwells had inadequate support. A load-bearing wall on the 15th floor was 6 inches thinner than specified. The building was evacuated on a Tuesday afternoon. 3,000 office workers streaming out onto the street, bewildered, carrying their laptops and coffee cups and wondering what was happening. By Wednesday, Thornwood Architectural Group was front-page news. Safety scandal rocks. Prestigious firm. Forged signatures, compromised buildings. The Thornwood crisis. Architect whistleblower exposes systemic fraud. That last headline made me uncomfortable. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I was just trying to keep people alive. But the media loves a narrative, and senior architect fights back against corner-cutting executives was too good to pass up. Garrett Thornwood III was arrested on Thursday. The charges included fraud, forgery, reckless endangerment, and involuntary manslaughter. The district attorney was considering additional charges as the investigation expanded. I watched the perp walk on the evening news, Garrett in handcuffs, being led out of his office, photographers flashing, reporters shouting questions. He looked small, young, terrified. For a moment, just a moment, I felt something like pity. Then I remembered Miguel Santos. The pity faded. Over the next 6 months, the case against Thornwood expanded. The general contractor pleaded guilty to fraud and received 5 years. The project manager cooperated with prosecutors and got probation. 2 of Garrett's lieutenants, the ones who'd helped implement his efficiency programs, were charged as accessories. The insurance companies launched their own investigations. Civil suits piled up. The firm's assets were frozen, then seized, then sold off to pay settlements. Thornwood Architectural Group, founded in 1952 by Richard Thornwood, ceased to exist on a cold November morning when the last employee cleaned out the last desk. I watched them carry the boxes out, the framed photos of completed projects, the awards we'd won, the signed blueprints from buildings that had stood for decades, 70 years of history, reduced to moving boxes and storage units. I should have felt victorious. I'd exposed the corruption, stopped the fraud, probably saved lives. The bad guys were in prison or on their way there, but mostly I felt tired and sad, because Richard's legacy deserved better. The firm he'd built, the principles he'd instilled, the promise that his name represented, all of it destroyed by one greedy grandson who thought he knew better. Nathan found me sitting on a bench outside the building. "How are you holding up?" I shrugged. "I don't know. I thought this would feel different. Winning usually does. Is this winning? Miguel Santos is still dead. Those buildings still have to be retrofitted or demolished. Thousands of people lost their jobs. And thousands more won't die in building collapses because of what you did." I looked at him. "That's the calculation, isn't it? Weigh the harm you prevented against the harm you caused. Hope the numbers come out positive. It's not a calculation, Eleanor. It's a choice. You saw something wrong and you fixed it. That's all any of us can do." My phone buzzed. A text from Linda Morrison. "Call me when you have a minute. I have a proposal." I called her that evening. "Eleanor, how are you feeling?" "Like I just burned down everything I spent 30 years building." "You didn't burn it down. Garrett did. You just turned on the lights so everyone could see the fire." "What's the proposal?" "HUD is creating a new oversight division, independent safety review for major construction projects, someone who reports directly to the secretary with authority to halt any project that doesn't meet standards." I was quiet for a moment. "And you want me to run it, build it from scratch, hire your own team, write your own procedures?" "Linda, I'm 57 years old. I should be thinking about retirement, not starting a new job." "That's exactly why you should take it. You have nothing left to prove, nothing left to lose. You can be honest in a way that someone still climbing the ladder can't." I thought about Richard Thornwood, about his belief that an architect's signature was a promise, about the responsibility that came with putting your name on something. When would I start? January 1st, but I'd need your answer by Friday. "You'll have it." I accepted the position the next morning. The Division of Construction Safety Review launched in February. Small staff to start, just me and 4 hand-picked engineers. But we had authority, independence, and a mandate. Review any project, inspect any site, halt any construction that didn't meet standards. No exceptions, no politics, no pressure. Richard would have approved. Our first case was a high-rise in Atlanta where the developer was trying to fast-track approvals. We found 3 significant code violations in the foundation design, nothing that would cause immediate collapse, but problems that would surface in 20 or 30 years. The developer was furious, called his congressman, threatened lawsuits, demanded my resignation. We didn't budge. Eventually, he fixed the problems. The building was completed on a modified timeline, and somewhere in Atlanta, people are living in homes that will still be standing when their grandchildren have grandchildren. That's the calculation. That's the choice. A year after I started, I got a letter, handwritten, no return address, postmarked from a medium-security federal prison in Pennsylvania. "Miss Price, I don't expect you to read this. I wouldn't blame you if you threw it away unopened. But I need to say something. Even if you never hear it, I killed a man. Not personally. I never held a weapon. Never pushed anyone. But I created the conditions that led to his death. I signed off on the cost savings. I authorized the use of my uncle's credentials, and later yours, to approve changes I knew were dangerous. Miguel Santos died because I wanted better quarterly numbers. I tell myself it was an accident, that I never intended for anyone to get hurt. that I was just doing what business schools teach: maximize efficiency, cut waste, improve margins. But that's a lie. I knew the risks. I ignored them because I thought the odds were in my favor. I gambled with other people's lives, and I lost. The worst part is that I can't undo it. Miguel is dead. His children will grow up without a father. His wife will struggle. And nothing I do, nothing I say, nothing I suffer in this place will ever make that right. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not sure forgiveness is possible. I'm just asking you to know that somewhere in this cell, there's a man who finally understands what Richard Thornwood was trying to teach. An architect's signature is a promise. I broke that promise, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to understand why I thought that was okay. Garrett Thornwood III. I read the letter 3 times. Then I folded it carefully and put it in my desk drawer, next to a photograph of Richard Thornwood and a copy of the first project I ever signed. Redemption is complicated. Garrett might be sincere. He might be manipulating me. He might be telling himself what he needs to believe to survive his sentence. I'll probably never know. But I kept the letter, because somewhere in there, behind the justifications and the self-pity, there might be a glimmer of genuine understanding, a moment when he actually grasped what he'd done. And if that moment is real, if somewhere in that prison cell there's actually growth happening, then maybe something good can come from all of this. Not forgiveness, not absolution, just possibility. The possibility that even the worst of us can learn. It's not much, but it's something. And sometimes something is all you get. Part 3. The Quiet Accountant. The coffee maker broke on the same day they erased my pension. I know that sounds dramatic, equating a $40 appliance with 28 years of retirement savings. But in the moment, standing in my kitchen with a puddle of lukewarm water spreading across the counter, it felt like the universe was making a point. My name is Robert Kim. I'm 54 years old. I spent 3 decades as a senior accountant at Meridian Capital Partners, one of the most respected private equity firms on the Eastern Seaboard. And last Tuesday, they threw me out like yesterday's garbage. Restructuring, they called it. Operational optimization. A difficult but necessary evolution in our organizational strategy. What they meant was, we found someone in Mumbai who'll do your job for 1/10 the salary, and we're using a legal loophole to avoid paying your pension. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning. I came to Meridian in 1996, straight from a small accounting firm in Queens, hired by Douglas Brennan himself, back when Meridian was just a scrappy startup trying to compete with the big boys. Douglas believed in 2 things: making money and keeping clean books. He used to say that the fastest way to destroy a business was to cook the numbers. You can lie to your wife, you can lie to the IRS, but you never lie to your books. The books are sacred. I believed him. For 28 years, I kept Meridian's books sacred, every transaction documented, every dollar accounted for, every regulatory filing submitted on time and without error. I wasn't flashy, didn't close deals or schmooze clients, but every deal that closed, every client that stayed, did so in part because our books were bulletproof. Investors trusted us, regulators trusted us, because I made sure they could. Then Douglas retired. His son Jason took over. Harvard MBA, 2 years at Goldman Sachs, and an unshakable belief that he was the smartest person in any room. Jason's first hire was Victor Osman, a chief revenue officer, whose job apparently consisted of finding new ways to squeeze money out of every transaction. Victor had slick hair, slicker ethics, and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. Within 6 months, they started changing things. Small changes at first, adjusting how certain expenses were categorized, timing revenue recognition a little more aggressively. Nothing technically illegal, just pushing the boundaries. I flagged concerns, sent memos, requested meetings. The meetings never happened. The memos disappeared into the ether, and the changes kept coming. Then, last Tuesday, Victor called me into his office. "Robert, good. Sit down." I sat. "I'll be direct. We're restructuring the finance department. Your position has been, well, we're going in a different direction." I stared at him. "I've been here 28 years. I know, and we appreciate your service, but the industry has evolved. We need people who are more adaptable, flexible, open to new methodologies." I understood suddenly. "You mean people who won't question the accounting irregularities?" Victor's smile flickered. "I don't know what you're talking about. The Q2 revenue recognition, the deferred expenses you've been hiding in subsidiary accounts, the related party transactions that weren't disclosed properly." The smile disappeared entirely. "Robert, I'm going to stop you right there. You're upset. That's understandable. But making accusations like that, they're not accusations if I have documentation. Silence. Victor's eyes went cold. What documentation? Every memo I sent, every concern I raised, every time I flagged something and got ignored. I leaned forward. I've been keeping copies, off-site, just in case. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. Then Victor leaned back, folded his hands. Well, this changes things slightly. He opened a drawer and pulled out a thick folder. Here's your severance package. 6 months' salary. Immediate release of your 401k. Full health coverage for a year. I didn't touch the folder. What about my pension? Victor's smile returned, colder than before. Unfortunately, due to recent changes in our benefit structure, employees terminated before 30 years of service are not eligible for pension benefits. The board approved the change last month. It's all perfectly legal. I felt the ground shift beneath me. 30 years. I was 2 years short, 2 years of service, and they'd structured my termination specifically to avoid paying my pension. A pension I'd contributed to for nearly 3 decades. That's theft. That's policy. Victor stood up. Security will escort you to your desk. You have 1 hour to collect your personal belongings. Your system access has already been terminated. I don't remember the walk to my desk. Don't remember packing up the photos of my wife, my kids, the diploma I'd been so proud of. Don't remember the security guard hovering while I disconnected my personal laptop. I remember standing outside the building at 4:47 p.m., holding a cardboard box, watching the sun set over Manhattan. And I remember thinking, they have no idea what they just did. My wife Jennifer was making dinner when I walked in. She saw my face and stopped stirring. What happened? I set down the box. Didn't answer. Robert, talk to me. I sat heavily at the kitchen table. The coffee maker was still broken, puddles still spreading, and I couldn't even summon the energy to clean it up. They fired me, restructured my position, terminated my pension. Jennifer sat down across from me, took my hands. We'll be okay. We have savings. You'll find another job. It's not about finding another job. I looked at her. They've been cooking the books, Jen. I've been flagging it for months. And now they fired me right before my pension vests, specifically so they don't have to pay what they owe me. Can they do that? Legally? Maybe. They had their lawyers rewrite the benefits policy last month, retroactively changed the vesting requirements. Jennifer was quiet for a moment. What are you going to do? I thought about Douglas Brennan, about his belief that books were sacred, about everything I'd built, everything I'd sacrificed, everything I'd believed in. I'm going to burn them to the ground. She didn't blink, didn't flinch, just nodded slowly. Where do we start? I loved my wife. We started in the basement. For years, I'd been bringing work home. Memos, reports, emails, printed copies of everything I'd flagged to leadership. Some people collect stamps. I collected evidence. Jennifer helped me organize it, by date, by project, by type of violation. We spread it across the ping-pong table nobody used and stared at the scope of what we'd uncovered. It was worse than I'd realized. The irregular revenue recognition was just the beginning. There were hidden fees buried in client contracts, undisclosed conflicts of interest, investment decisions that benefited Jason personally at clients' expense. And then there was the big one. 3 years ago, Meridian had acquired a smaller firm called Hartwell Investment Group. Standard private equity move. Buy the company, strip out costs, sell it for profit. But Hartwell had a pension fund, a funded, fully vested pension fund serving 400 retirees. According to the acquisition documents, Meridian assumed responsibility for those pension obligations. It was part of the purchase price, factored into the valuation. But the money never showed up in our liability accounts. $43 million. Vanished. I'd flagged this 2 years ago. Written a detailed memo. Copied Jason, Victor, and the general counsel. The response I got was a one-line email. This has been handled at the executive level. No further action required. No further action required. 400 retirees who thought their pensions were secure, who planned their retirements around money they'd earned, who trusted that someone was watching out for them. I'd trusted that someone too. I thought handled at the executive level meant handled. Now, looking at the numbers, I understood what it actually meant. They'd taken the pension money, $43 million transferred to a subsidiary in the Cayman Islands, laundered through a series of shell companies and ultimately deposited in accounts controlled by Jason Brennan personally. It wasn't a bookkeeping error. It was theft, and I had the paper trail. The next week was a blur of preparation. I contacted 3 people, my lawyer, a journalist at the Wall Street Journal, and a senior investigator at the SEC. The lawyer, Patricia Delgado, reviewed my documentation and went pale. Robert, this is Significant. I know. If what you're showing me is accurate, we're looking at wire fraud, securities violations, pension fund theft, and probably RICO charges. That's what I thought too. You could be subpoenaed. You might be accused of theft yourself, taking confidential documents. They'll try to discredit you. I know. Patricia leaned back. Why are you doing this? You could just walk away, find another job, move on. I thought about the 400 retirees from Hartwell, about the pension I'd lost, about Douglas Brennan's voice telling me the books were sacred, because someone has to. The journalist was more enthusiastic. This is incredible, Sarah Chen said, flipping through my files. We've suspected something was off at Meridian for years, but we could never prove anything. You've basically handed us the entire case on a silver platter. I want certain conditions. She raised an eyebrow. Name them. First, protect the retirees. When this story breaks, those 400 people from Hartwell need to know what happened to their money. Help them organize. Help them sue. Help them get justice. Done. Second, I want the story to focus on the victims, not me. I'm not doing this for fame or revenge. I'm doing it because someone stole money from people who earned it. Also done. Third, and this is the important one, I want the story to run the same day the SEC announces their investigation. Coordinate the timing. Maximum impact. Sarah smiled. You've thought this through. I've had 28 years to think about what matters. Turns out it's not the job. It's not the pension. It's whether you can look at yourself in the mirror and know you did the right thing. The SEC investigator, a severe woman named Helen Cho, was the most skeptical. You understand that we receive tips like this regularly. Most of them don't pan out. This one will. Your documentation is impressive, but we'll need to verify everything independently. I expected nothing less, and you're aware that if your information is accurate, you may be called to testify. Your entire career will be examined. Every decision you made, every document you signed. I'm aware. Helen studied me. Why now? Why not 2 years ago when you first found the pension discrepancy? I was quiet for a moment. 2 years ago, I still believed the system would correct itself. I thought if I flagged the problem through proper channels, someone higher up would fix it. I trusted that good people would do the right thing. And now I understand that good people doing the right thing isn't automatic. Sometimes you have to force it. Helen nodded slowly. Mr. Kim, I've been doing this job for 18 years. Most people who bring us information are motivated by money or revenge. You're the first one I've met who seems genuinely motivated by morality. Is that a problem? No, it's refreshing. She closed her notebook. We'll be in touch. The story broke on a Monday. Front page of the Wall Street Journal. Meridian Capital. The 43 million pension heist. Same day, the SEC announced an emergency investigation and froze all Meridian accounts. Same day, the FBI executed search warrants at Meridian's offices and Jason Brennan's home. Same day, the 400 Hartwell retirees filed a class action lawsuit. By Tuesday, Meridian's stock had crashed 80%. By Wednesday, Jason Brennan was in federal custody. By Thursday, Victor Osman was cooperating with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence. And by Friday, I was sitting in my living room, watching the coverage on television, feeling absolutely nothing. Jennifer sat beside me, holding my hand. How do you feel? I shook my head. I don't know. I thought I'd feel vindicated, triumphant, but mostly I just feel tired. You did something important. Those retirees, they're going to get their money back. The criminals are going to prison. I know, but I also destroyed a company I spent 28 years building. Thousands of people lost their jobs. Families are going to suffer. Those families were going to suffer anyway. You just exposed the rot before it spread further. I looked at her. My wife of 26 years. The woman who'd supported me through late nights and missed dinners and all the sacrifices that come with climbing the corporate ladder. I'm not sorry I did it, I said. I'm just sorry it had to be done. She squeezed my hand. That's what integrity feels like. It hurts. 6 months later, the trials began. Jason Brennan was convicted on 23 counts of fraud, money laundering, and pension theft. He received 15 years in federal prison. Victor Osman got 8 years, reduced to 5 for cooperation. The company's general counsel, who had drafted the legal cover for the scheme, got 3 years. The Hartwell retirees recovered their pension money plus damages. Most of them were made whole. Some even came out ahead. And me? I was offered my pension back, plus back pay, plus a substantial settlement for wrongful termination. I turned it down. Not because I didn't need the money. We needed it desperately. But taking the settlement meant signing a non-disclosure agreement, meant agreeing to never discuss what had happened at Meridian. I couldn't do that. Instead, I testified. For 3 weeks, I sat in that courtroom and answered every question, every decision I'd made, every document I'd signed, every concern I'd raised, and every time I'd been ignored. When it was over, the prosecutor shook my hand. "Mr. Kim, your testimony was crucial. Without you, this case might never have been proven." I nodded. "What will you do now?" he asked. I thought about it. Start over, I guess. Find a new job. Try to rebuild. With your reputation, after what you've done, you'll have employers lining up. He was right. The coverage had made me something of a celebrity in accounting circles. The whistleblower who took down a corrupt empire. The quiet accountant who refused to stay quiet. But I didn't want celebrity. I wanted to do my job. To keep clean books. To honor the promise I'd made to Douglas Brennan 3 decades ago. The funny thing was, I never got to tell Douglas what happened. He died during the trials. Heart attack at 89. Peaceful, according to his family. I went to the funeral, stood in the back, watched his son Jason, the son who would soon be going to prison, deliver a eulogy that mentioned integrity and principles without any apparent sense of irony. Afterward, Douglas's widow approached me. "You're Robert Kim." "Yes, ma'am. Douglas talked about you, said you were one of the good ones." I didn't know what to say. She took my hand. "Thank you for protecting his legacy, for not letting them destroy what he built." "I'm sorry about Jason." She shook her head. "Don't be. Jason destroyed himself. Douglas would have done the same thing you did, if he'd known." She pressed something into my palm and walked away. I looked down. It was a cufflink, old, worn, obviously Douglas's. Inside was a tiny inscription. "The books are sacred." I kept it, still wear it on special occasions. Reminds me why I did what I did. Sometimes the right thing isn't easy, isn't clean, doesn't feel triumphant. Sometimes the right thing just feels like surviving, but it's still the right thing, and that has to count for something. Part 4. The Patent Clerk. You're nobody. 3 words, 11 letters. The distilled essence of 15 years of corporate dismissal. Sandra Park said them to me on a Thursday afternoon, in a conference room with too much glass and not enough soul. She was the new chief technology officer at Neotech Dynamics, and I was the guy who filed the patents. Her problem, though she didn't know it yet, was that I didn't just file the patents, I read them. My name is James Holloway. I'm 47 years old. I have a law degree I never used, an engineering degree I barely remember, and an intimate knowledge of every patent Neotech has filed in the last decade and a half. Patent clerks are invisible. We exist in the crawl space between innovation and exploitation, translating brilliant ideas into legal documents that protect or don't protect their creators. Most of my colleagues treat it as drudgery, fill out the forms, submit to the USPTO, file, and forget. But I pay attention. Every patent tells a story. Who invented what, when they invented it, and most importantly, who claims ownership. Over the years, I'd noticed a pattern. Engineers would submit inventions, I would prepare the paperwork, and then, somewhere between my desk and the final filing, things would change. Inventors' names would disappear. Assignee information would shift. Credit that belonged to individual employees would migrate to shell companies controlled by Neotech's executive team. 15 years of watching smart, creative people get erased from their own work. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about Marcus Chen. Marcus was 28, fresh from Stanford's engineering program, and possibly the smartest person I'd ever met. In 3 years at Neotech, he'd revolutionized our approach to energy storage. His supercapacitor designs were going to change the industry. I filed his first patent when he was 26, watched his name on the inventor line with something like pride. Then, 6 months ago, Sandra Park arrived. Sandra came from a competitor, had a reputation for maximizing IP value, which is corporate speak for extracting every penny from every invention, regardless of who gets hurt. She took one look at Marcus's supercapacitor patents and saw dollar signs. The problem was, Marcus had gotten wise. He'd negotiated a royalty agreement, a small percentage of any licensing revenue from his inventions. Not enough to make him rich, just enough to make him invested. Sandra didn't like invested employees. Last month, she called Marcus into her office and fired him. Cited performance concerns that didn't exist, had security escort him out before he could grab his personal belongings. Then she had me file an amendment to his patents. Not the usual amendment. This one changed the inventor designation, removed Marcus's name entirely, listed Sandra Park as the sole inventor. I stared at the paperwork for a long time. In 15 years, I'd seen a lot of questionable things. Names shuffled, Credit diluted, ownership obscured. But this was different. This was theft, pure and simple. Sandra Park didn't invent the supercapacitor technology. She couldn't tell a supercapacitor from a toaster oven. The documentation Marcus had submitted, engineering notes, experimental data, prototype specifications, was entirely his work, and she wanted me to erase him. I walked into her office on Thursday afternoon. "The Chen Amendment," I said. "I can't file it." Sandra looked up from her laptop with the expression of someone who's just been informed that their coffee is slightly too hot. "Excuse me? The inventor designation change. It's fraudulent. Marcus Chen developed that technology. The engineering records prove it. If we file this amendment, we're committing patent fraud." Sandra leaned back, crossed her arms. "Mr. Holloway, do you know what your job is?" "I file patents. I don't file fraudulent ones." "Your job," she continued as if I hadn't spoken, "is to do what you're told. You're a clerk. You push papers. You don't make strategic decisions. You're nobody." There it was. 11 letters. "I'm the person standing between you and a federal crime." Her eyes went cold. "You're the person who's about to be unemployed." I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a folder. Thick, heavy, 15 years of documentation. "Before you make that decision, you might want to look at this." She didn't take the folder. "What is it?" "Every patent I've filed where the inventor designation was changed without the original inventor's consent. Every amendment where credit was stolen. Every document that proves Neotech has been systematically committing patent fraud for over a decade." Silence. "You've been keeping records." "I've been paying attention." "There's a difference." Sandra stood up slowly, circled around her desk, stopped directly in front of me. "You're threatening me." "I'm informing you. What you do with that information is your choice. I could have you arrested for theft of confidential documents. You could try. But then I'd have to explain to the authorities why I felt it necessary to document systematic fraud. And I don't think that's a conversation Neotech wants to have." Long, loaded silence. Finally Sandra smiled. Not a friendly smile. The kind of smile a shark gives before it takes a bite. "Mr. Holloway, you've just made a very serious mistake." "Probably, but I've been making mistakes for 15 years. This one, at least, is mine." I walked out. By the time I reached my desk, security was already waiting. They escorted me out in classic fashion. No chance to gather belongings. No exit interview. Just 2 large men and a cardboard box waiting in the lobby. But they made one mistake. They let me take my briefcase. And in that briefcase was a flash drive containing copies of everything. Every patent, every amendment, every piece of evidence. 15 years of documentation compressed into 32 gigabytes. That night I made some calls. First to Marcus Chen. He was surprised to hear from me. Patent clerks don't usually contact inventors after they've been fired. "Mr. Holloway, what's going on? Sandra Park is trying to steal your patents. She wants to file an amendment removing you as inventor." Long pause. "Can she do that? Legally?" "No. The original inventor designation is protected, but if nobody challenges the amendment, it'll go through. I don't have money for lawyers. You might not need them. I have documentation proving the fraud, but I need you to do something first." "What?" "I need you to file a complaint with the USPTO, challenge the amendment before it's processed. Once there's an official challenge, they have to investigate." "I don't know how to do that." "I do. I'll walk you through it." We spent 3 hours on the phone that night. By the time we finished, Marcus had filed his complaint, and I had a plan. Second call was to a lawyer named Patricia Delgado. Yes, the same Patricia who helped Robert Kim. We'd met at a conference years ago, stayed in touch. "James, it's late. I know, I need your help." I explained everything. Neotech, Sandra Park, the patent fraud, the documentation I'd been keeping. When I finished, Patricia was quiet for a moment. "This is going to be big." "I know. They'll come after you. Everything they have." "I know that too." "Why are you doing this? You could have just walked away." I thought about Marcus Chen, about all the inventors whose names had been erased, about 15 years of watching brilliant people get stolen from. "Because someone should." Patricia made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You're the third person to say that to me in the last year." "Who were the other 2? A ground crew supervisor who took down an aviation empire, and an accountant who exposed a pension scheme." "Sounds like good company." "It is. Let's get started." The case moved faster than expected. Marcus's complaint triggered a USPTO investigation. When the investigators started looking, they found not just his amendment, but the pattern I'd documented. 117 patents, 43 inventors erased, 15 years of systematic fraud. Neotech tried to contain it. Lawyers, settlements, confidentiality agreements. but you can't settle a federal investigation, and you can't silence someone who's already given all their documentation to the FBI. Sandra Park was arrested 8 weeks after she called me nobody. The charges: patent fraud, wire fraud, theft of intellectual property, conspiracy to commit fraud. She looked different in her mugshot, smaller, older, less certain of her superiority. Jason Turner, Neotech's CEO, was arrested a week later, then the CFO, then the general counsel. The company didn't survive. Neither did I, exactly. I mean, I'm still alive, still working. But the person who walked into Sandra Park's office that Thursday afternoon is gone. That person believed in keeping his head down, in doing his job, in trusting that if he just followed the rules, the system would work. The person I am now knows better. The system works when someone makes it work, when someone pays attention, when someone refuses to be invisible. Marcus Chen's patents were restored. He received back royalties plus damages, used the money to start his own company. His supercapacitors are now in half the electric vehicles on the market. The 42 other inventors whose names had been erased filed their own claims. Some won, some didn't, but all of them were finally acknowledged, their names restored, their work recognized, their existence confirmed. I got job offers, lots of them. Companies wanted the guy who'd exposed Neotech, the whistleblower, the hero. I turned them all down. Instead, I started a nonprofit, the Patent Integrity Project. We help individual inventors navigate the patent system, protect their work, ensure their names stay on their creations. It doesn't pay much, but I sleep well. Sometimes that's enough. Last month, I got a letter. No return address, handwritten, postmarked from a federal correctional facility. Mr. Holloway, you were right about everything. I spent my career believing that value was extracted, not created, that the purpose of innovation was to generate returns, not to acknowledge creators. I was wrong. In here, I've had time to think about what I did, the names I erased, the credit I stole, the people I treated as nobody. You called me out, stood up when everyone else looked away, paid the price for telling the truth. I don't expect forgiveness, don't deserve it, but I wanted you to know that somewhere in this cell, the lesson finally landed. I was the nobody all along. I just couldn't see it. Sandra Park. I read the letter twice. Then I filed it carefully in a folder labeled correspondence. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, just acknowledgement. Sometimes that's all you get, and sometimes it's enough. Epilogue. The network. The four of us met for the first time at a conference in Chicago. Danny Chen, the ground crew supervisor who brought down an aviation empire. Eleanor Price, the architect who exposed construction fraud. Robert Kim, the accountant who uncovered a pension theft. And me, James Holloway, the patent clerk who proved inventors matter. We didn't plan to meet, didn't even know each other's names until Linda Morrison, who seemed to be connected to everything, suggested we compare notes. The conference was about corporate accountability, whistleblower protection, the mechanics of doing the right thing in a world that often punishes it. But our conversation wasn't about mechanics. It was about cost. I lost everything, Robert said. My job, my pension, my sense of security. Sometimes I wonder if it was worth it. It was worth it, Eleanor replied. The buildings are being fixed. People are safer. But at what cost? Thousands of people lost their jobs when the company collapsed. Those jobs were built on fraud, Danny pointed out. They were going to collapse anyway. You just controlled the demolition. We talked for hours. About the fear, the isolation, the moments of doubt, about the letters from prison, about whether redemption is possible for people who've done terrible things, about what comes next. James, that's me, was the last to speak. I used to think being invisible was a curse. Nobody noticed me, nobody respected me. I was just the guy who filed the papers. I looked at my three companions, fellow travelers on a strange road. But being invisible gave me perspective. I saw things that important people missed. I paid attention when nobody else did. And when the moment came, I had everything I needed. Eleanor nodded slowly. The system failed. We fixed it. That's the story. The story is simpler than that, Robert said. Good people did hard things, and the world got a little better. Danny raised his coffee cup. To the invisible people, we clinked cups. To the people who pay attention. To the ones who keep records. To the quiet ones who finally speak up. We drank. And then, because we were all a little drunk on righteousness and caffeine, we made a pact. Stay connected. Share information. Build a network. Because there are more Marcus Whitfields out there. More Sandra Parks. More Jason Brennans. And there are more of us too. The invisible ones. The overlooked ones. The people who do their jobs so well that nobody notices until we stop. We're watching. We're documenting, we're waiting, and when the moment comes, we'll be ready. This is our story, but it's also a warning to every executive who thinks the rules don't apply to them, to every CEO who treats employees like disposable parts, to every person in power who forgets that power comes with responsibility. The invisible people are watching, and we keep very good records.